Yo, what's going on guys? HyperX here, and today I want to talk about Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. The game launches on October the 26th on all platforms, PlayStation, Xbox, Switch and PC, and recently I had a chance to go hands-on thanks to the guys over at Square Enix, and today I want to talk a bit about my hands-on impressions because, I'll be honest, I don't necessarily always do videos like this, but this is a game that didn't really click for me. I didn't necessarily enjoy my hands-on time too much, however, I wanted to give you guys a chance to take a look at some gameplay anyway, because sometimes just seeing it alone can help you make up your mind, but I kind of want to talk about the things that I didn't really enjoy too much and talk about maybe sort of what I would have liked to have seen in place of it, so that way hopefully I can talk about it in a slightly more constructive manner. So if you guys do enjoy this video regardless, then a like would be super appreciated. If you have any questions about the game, by all means let me know in the comments down below. Keep in mind I only got to play for about an hour. They jumped me forward to a chapter later on in the game, so obviously I didn't get the introduction, I didn't get all the sort of tutorial flow, I kind of just had to pick things up as I went along. I was also given some abilities, so I don't necessarily have a complete feel for the full breadth of the game, but I did still get to experience combat, get to experience some of the sort of downtime stuff you can do, the interaction with the characters, and effectively got a sort of slice of what they're trying to deliver with this game. So the first thing I want to talk about right off the bat that I kind of really struggled to connect with was just the characters. We've seen this a couple of times recently, of course it happened with Marvel's Avengers, where the character models, there was something about them where their version of Captain America and Iron Man and just different people, the faces just looked kind of off. Now, for Guardians of the Galaxy, they're obviously telling their own story, so it isn't necessarily going to be the exact Guardians you know from the film, but it is quite hard, especially if you're invested in, say, the cinematic universe, to try and separate those images. And what I felt with a lot of these characters is that you kind of just didn't get the same connection, even down to Groot, who is quite obviously Groot. I mean, he's a big ass tree. You still kind of didn't get that same feeling, to the point where you could probably just title this game Space Adventure and then not have the Guardians name on it, and it would probably still just be the same. I don't mean that in necessarily a mean way, but I just felt like I didn't necessarily have that Guardians feel to it. Yes, they've still got sort of some of the comedy in there, they've still got sort of some of the fun interactions between the characters. They do a decent job of course, trying to capture the personality of, you know, Star-Lord and Rocket Raccoon and Groot and things like that, so they're still very much present. But I do feel like that visual connection with the characters just made that a little bit more difficult. However, outside of that, when you're playing throughout the game, you get to explore the ship, you get to interact with your team, you get to have various sort of different dialogues, you get dialogue options. So for anybody that likes that sort of conversation, that like branching conversation option with choices, there is of course that to explore. And then outside of that, I of course got to jump into some gameplay. Now, combat I feel is where this game falls short. The game itself, if you haven't seen the trailer, is effectively a sort of action-adventure style game. It's a third-person shooter, you play as Star-Lord, you of course have your blasters and you have some melee attacks, and you then have the ability to call in your teammates for some team combat. Obviously they're always around, they'll fight with you and stuff like that, but primarily you are playing as Star-Lord. Now my issue mainly was that a lot of the combat felt quite clunky and there wasn't really a great degree of feedback. The fact that you spend a lot of time playing as Star-Lord, you often sit there and you are kind of just shooting enemies and there's not that sort of nice visceral feedback where you like really feel like you're doing damage. It kind of just feels a lot of the time like you're holding down the trigger just waiting for them to die. Now obviously you break up combat by calling in your teammates, and that is kind of like a fun component to it if ever you've played any of those sort of team-based shooters, or you play other things like the Marvel team-up games and you played like Marvel Ultimate Alliance. Being able to call people in and have sort of cool team-up attacks is nice. Like it's a fun thing where you just call in Groot and he ties someone down, or you call in Drax and he just goes and throws a barrel at someone. There's definitely some fun elements to it when you see that, although the implementation of that is a little bit clunky because some of those characters have multiple abilities. So ordinarily you have to hold down a button to bring up the menu, you then have to press a button that links to that character and then press another button that corresponds to their ability, which in and of itself isn't a huge deal. It's 3 button inputs, but when you're doing this in the middle of combat, it definitely slows down the pace a little bit when you sort of compare it to something like Tales of Arise recently, where if you want someone to come in and help you, you literally just press a direction on the D-pad. Now I know functionally that wouldn't be possible in this game, given that you need to have multiple inputs for the different abilities, but it is worth calling out that when you're in the middle of combat and you're being swamped by enemies, having to sort of juggle and work out which ability you want, which different direction, it just gets a bit messy. So there is, of course, that element to it. That being said, there are cool situations where occasionally you'll have these sort of button prompts and you can do these fun team-up attacks and you sort of jump in and fight together. They do look pretty cool on screen, so obviously you kind of get those nice takedowns, but again, those happen slightly fewer and further between. Outside of that, the other thing, and this is one of the things where I feel like they had so much potential to do a lot of really cool stuff with this, but you have your equivalent of this game's ultimate ability, which in this is the huddle up mechanic. Now again, I'm sure they did this because of the sort of comedic style of Guardians of the Galaxy, but whenever you perform what is effectively your super, it then interrupts combat. You go into a screen where all the team run up and huddle together, and then you have a little dialogue option whereby if you get it correct, you then power up your entire team. If you get it wrong, you just power up yourself. Now, first time you do that, it's kind of cool. I messed it up a few times, so I kept on getting the power up for myself. The problem is, this happens every single time you do the huddle up. So every single time you're in a fight, you then have this 10-15 second break where you're waiting for this dialogue thing to play out before you can then get back in the action. So it kind of feels a bit disjointed. And the problem is as well, in a lot of these games, anytime you have an ultimate ability, this is the kind of thing that you want to be a screen-filling spectacle, something like huge and amazing. But in reality, what happens is you go and turn pink, you get a damage boost, and it's about it. So personally, I would have loved to have seen them do something bigger with that. When you think about, you know, the cinematic universe, when you think about the cool things they could have done, I do feel like it would have been much more exciting to have seen maybe all of like the Guardians come together and just do like a big, huge team up attack that just looks over the top, something that just like deals a great deal of damage and is a lot more quick fire, quick impact, and just sort of like huge spectacle, as opposed to the current implementation. Obviously, personal opinion, maybe it's one of those things where if you really like sort of the dialogue options, maybe you like that change. But for me, it just definitely felt like a bit of a disconnect. Now, of course, outside of that, when you're exploring the levels, you do, of course, have some interactables. You have some light puzzle solving, which is invariably handled by both yourself and your team members. Sometimes there are elements of the environment that only your team members can interact with, so you'll then basically send them to interact with certain things. Occasionally, that can get a little bit clunky because sometimes you don't know who is supposed to interact with what objects, so you're basically just pressing different buttons, hoping that someone will say, yep, I'll open that door for you. But that's kind of the way you'll interact with it. You'll use your scanner to locate objects around the world, you'll then assign different people to them to go and interact with them, and you'll then navigate your way through before you then go around and fight some more enemies. So I will say, overall, the thing about the game is that it doesn't necessarily do anything new, and not that every single game has to. You know, not every single game that comes out has to reinvent the wheel, has to do something genre defining, but I will say that it definitely doesn't bring anything new to the table, and for me, the combination of the difficulty connecting with the characters, paired with the lack of feedback and the lack of sort of spectacle in the combat, I just felt it was quite hard to connect with this one, so I personally didn't necessarily enjoy my hands-on time too much. Now, whether that would change once I've had a chance to play more of the game, I won't know, but I will say that's where I'm currently at based on what I've played so far. So hopefully you guys find that helpful. I don't want to be like a downer and sort of tell you guys do play this or don't play this, but I did want to speak to you honestly about how I felt about the game and what my thoughts were. So again, if you guys have any questions, by all means let me know in the comments down below, but otherwise keep it locked for plenty more. If you want to catch more from us at HyperX Gaming, don't forget you can catch the guys TwoSixNine and Paradise Central streaming over on Twitch weekdays, playing a variety of games. If you guys want to jump in, tune in, watch, and even join in, then make sure you check them out. The links to those are in the description box down below, and of course you can join the Discord to get involved in all of the discussions.